And welcome back, Bears fans, to another edition of the Bears Brothers podcast. In case you were wondering where we were on Sunday, well, we are actually at Soldier Field as we are all together in person for the first time ever. And despite the loss, it was amazing getting to hang out with our crew in person, like I said, for the first time ever. We found some interesting things out, including Nick being the shortest one in the group. I am your host, Will DeWitt, and tonight I am joined by my two fellow Bears brothers, Brandon Hazlett and Nicholas Moriano, the short guy. Gentlemen, how are you doing tonight? Are you excited for Bears Packers tomorrow?
You bet. I've got 2 exams tomorrow, so to finish up the day with some Bears Packers football is going to be a good way to go out for Thursday.
To be completely honest, Will, I had a hunch that I'd be the shortest one going in and meeting you guys on Sunday, but I am excited. Bears Packers, one of the best rivalries in sports, so it's gonna be a good show.
All right, good stuff, short stuff. All right, so it's time to renew that most storied rivalry in all of sports. And although this looks to be one of the most underwhelming matchups between these two teams in quite some time, I'm still excited to take down the Cheeseheads tomorrow night, and I'm hopeful for back-to-back wins at Lambeau Field. So, guys, let's just dive right into this. Who are the Green Bay Packers? And let's first start with my patented quick snapshot. The Packers are 3-2 on the year, second in the NFC North, and they are coming off a 30-16 loss against the Cowboys. On offense, they are 25th in yards with only 331 yards per game and 17th in points per game with 22.8 on average. And guys, let's start with the man under center, Aaron Rodgers, who has never lost back-to-back games against the Bears, something that we all hope changes tomorrow. But he's been a shell of his former self this season and has made more poor decisions than ever before. Definitely not the Aaron Rodgers that we're all used to. Brandon, go ahead and start. What's your take on Aaron Rodgers?
Well, first of all, do you guys know if Brett Favre is going to be in attendance tomorrow? I believe they're 0-2 in honoring Brett Favre.
I sure hope so then.
Exactly. But Aaron Rodgers, I got one stat on this little card that should hopefully, in my mind, settle the Jay Cutler, Brian Hoyer debacle. I promise it'll all wrap back up together. But Aaron Rodgers is last among qualifying quarterbacks in yards per attempt and completion percentage. Do you know what that means? That means that Brian Hoyer is ahead of Aaron Rodgers. And if you're the analytics kind of person, that would mean you want Brian Hoyer over Aaron Rodgers. And that's not necessarily... No. That's a perfect reason why I don't like Pro Football Focus grades per se. I don't know what their grades are, but just looking at that, that's something that I kind of took away from it. So there's two stats for you right there. Aaron Rodgers is last in yards per attempt and completion percentage, which tells you he is not his normal self this year. Against Dallas, which is kind of a tough game to match up with because Dallas has been playing really well. He had some good protection for most of the game. He was only sacked once. We know that he'll use his feet as a last resort option as he's beat the Bears a couple of times by doing that, unfortunately. And we've already kind of brought up his accuracy. Where's it at? He was typically guys that he hits in stride, like he was throwing behind guys. He had Randall Cobb beat on a deep inside route, and he underthrew it. That is a play that Aaron Rodgers makes in his sleep. Apparently he was sleeping pretty hard because he didn't make that play, which tells me that he's not himself, and I really do not know why. But as long as he's going to keep struggling, Bears fans should really hope that continues tomorrow.
No, exactly. And like you said, he has been really off target. Last week, he had 7 off-target throws, despite really good protection, and he's just not throwing receivers open. His decision-making is poor, and like you said, he just has been making more mistakes than ever before. And really just looking at, that last game as well, like we just said, he's a shell of his former self. Nick, do you have any insight on how the Bears, how do you think he's going to fare tomorrow night against the Bears?
Well, the thing is, I think that the Bears, okay, this is going to sound weird, but the Bears offense is going to give Aaron Rodgers opportunities because the Bears offense can't sustain drives. It's going to put the Green Bay offense on the field multiple times. And with the Bears having, a short week and having a lot of injuries, I think Aaron Rodgers, I hate to say it, might actually, even though he's struggling, still have a decent game. I mean, it is Aaron Rodgers. There's no way that the Green Bay Packers are going to come out flat after being embarrassed in Lambeau Field against, the Cowboys. Just when you look at it, it's a game where this is probably going to be Aaron Rodgers' bounce back game, and he's going to show that statistic with Brian Hoyer being better. It's just going to be a statistic because when it all comes out in the end, he'll obviously play better than Brian Hoyer because, it's Rodgers versus Hoyer. There's no way that Hoyer's going to outplay Rodgers in this game.
Yeah, I agree. And one of Rodgers' favorite targets is Jordy Nelson. He has 7 targets in every game this year. He's scored in the last 4 out of 5 games as well. Brandon, do you want to go ahead and start us off and kind of run down the Packers receivers, starting with Jordy Nelson?
Yeah, he's obviously Aaron Rodgers' favorite quarterback. He leads the team in touchdowns, I believe. Yes, he has 5. That's half of Rodgers' total touchdowns. He struggled to block, though, on a screen pass. So if they're going to throw screen passes out to Randall Cobb, whoever's on Jordy Nelson should have no problem getting around him to get the tackle. And he did have a fumble where Claiborne put his helmet on the ball and he just kind of lost it. And here's something that sounds familiar. Speaking of Randall Cobb, he says that we need to start scoring more touchdowns instead of field goals. I think we just had somebody on the Bears say that in a much more adult language kind of way. We've seen him I've seen Randall Cobb line up in the backfield a couple times. He's just kind of Aaron Rodgers' immediate dump off route if we see that. He did a good job of getting behind coverage a couple times, but Aaron Rodgers, just with his bad accuracy lately, just cannot make the pass. He was wide open in the end zone, and Aaron Rodgers just missed him like way, way high up here. He did have 1 touchdown reception against Dallas on a short route. It was the first passing touchdown of the second half of the year for the Packers. It was Cobb's first touchdown of the year. And like I said, he's ready to score touchdowns and not field goals. And Davante Adams, who was questionable to play, he actually is questionable with his concussion now that I look at my notes. He did have a crucial drop to start the first drive with a minute 39 left in the first half. And the big hit that gave him the concussion was from Sean Lee. So I'm curious to know if he's going to play. He'll be the slot guy for the Packers, and then they're not going to have Jared Cook and Richard Rodgers. There's too many Rodgers on this team.
Well,
he was a non-factor last week. What's that?
So one of them's plenty, but go ahead.
Yes, one of them is plenty, but the other Rodgers was a non-factor last week for the year. He's got 8 catches, 77 yards, and a touchdown. So last week he didn't do a whole lot. I'm curious to know if that will continue to be the case next year or Thursday. Man, I am way ahead for some reason. But Ty Montgomery is the last receiver I'm going to touch on. He's listed as a receiver, but he had 3 rushes for 6 yards. And we may end up seeing him in the backfield more, as we won't see Eddie Lacy or James Starks for Green Bay in the backfield either. So look for maybe Ty Montgomery to be back there. He led the team last week with receptions with 10. But if he's going to continue to line up in the backfield, we may see him run the ball more than anything.
We can. And, just looking at receivers as well, like I said, Nelson, he's been pretty efficient with all those touchdowns, but he's actually been struggling in the past couple weeks as well. And one of the things I've noticed as well is it just seems like he doesn't have any legs out there. He only had 4 yards after the catch last week out of his 68 yards total. And 46 of those 68 yards came when that game was totally out of reach on like one of the final drives of the game. So obviously the Cowboys weren't trying their hardest. So that's kind of like a skewed stat as well. And Randall Cobb, he's had 11 targets in back-to-back weeks, so I expect Rodgers to look his way early and often, especially because the Bears are having some injury issues of their own, and they might have to go without Tracy Porter and Bryce Callahan next week. Nick, how do you think the Bears are going to match up to these receivers, especially if those 2 corners aren't going to be able to give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, if Tracy Porter and Bryce Callahan can't start, you're looking at probably Jacoby Glenn on one side and either Sherrick McManus or Devontae Bosby. And, even though Rodgers has been struggling and, these receivers haven't been themselves, you have to think that Rodgers is going to, take advantage of this matchup. And if, they put Randall Cobb in the slot, yet your nickel cornerback's going to be Cre'Von LeBlanc, who we've seen struggled already this season. And I don't know. I just think that with the injuries that the Bears have, especially if Porter and Callahan can't go for tomorrow night, it could be a long day. And like I said earlier, they're going to have a lot of opportunities because this Bears offense can't sustain drives. So the Packers are going to be out there for a bunch of time. And, the thing is, these guys in the secondary can't get injured because these are the last guys that are capable of playing. These are the last eligible guys. So we can't have any injuries, and they're going to be asked to do a lot, tomorrow night. So it could be a tough matchup.
Do you think there's a possibility that the Bears play DHC, DeAndre Houston Carson, at cornerback, maybe if they don't like how LeBlanc's been playing?
I don't see so. Nick, how about you?
Yeah, I don't honestly see it happening. I thought he had an injury too, so I thought that's what was another reason why he hasn't been able to get into the field. But I mean, if one of these guys goes down and he is capable of, playing, they're gonna have to play him regardless because there is nobody left.
Yeah, we are running thin, and that's for sure. And I mean, let's give the secondary credit. They didn't do a terrible job last week. They didn't allow a single 100-yard receiver last week, and they haven't allowed an opposing receiver to score since week 3. So just keep that in mind, guys. I mean, it's not been the worst, but obviously these injuries are some reasons to hold our breath tomorrow, especially with Aaron Rodgers' knack of always kind of picking apart the Bears. So hopefully we can kind of just stay on the same kind of path that we've been able to since week 3 and not allow any of these Packers receivers to reach the end zone. Let's kind of switch over some gears here, guys, and let's talk about this Packers offensive line. They only gave up 4 pressures last week and 1 sack. However, the Cowboys only rushed 14.6% of the time, which made, obviously, the Packers' job up front very easy. Brandon, what insight do you have on that offensive line?
They're arguably one of the best starting 5 that we'll see all year. Like Dallas is, I think, the obvious number 1 at this point, and Green Bay's got to be right there in the top 5 with them. And just like we've seen last week with Jacksonville, they will occasionally bring in extra linemen to block. They will report as eligible. So that's when you know it's an obvious running situation. So they should stack the box if the Packers are going to bring in the extra linemen to help block, because the running game right now is going to look like Ty Montgomery and Niles Davis, who has 1 rush for -2 yards on the year. So the offensive line is really going to have to help this running game, whoever is back there. And I think as long as they can get forward movement, get into the second line of linebackers, then I think that the Packers will kind of have their way as far as running the ball.
Nick, do you see the Bears front? How do you think that they should kind of attack that Packers offensive line? What would you do?
You know, I do exactly what the Cowboys did. Guys, Vic Fangio is 5-1 against Aaron Rodgers. So he's obviously figured out a way to, put his players in the right position. And I don't think that the Bears should rush him. In the past, Vic Fangio's defenses have just kind of dropped back and make Rodgers have to find the hole. And, this is the perfect season to do it because he's finally struggling and everyone's hearing about it. But if you rush him, you're obviously going to leave holes in the defense. But with not many pass rushers on this team, the only thing he could do is drop more people back into coverage. And I found this interesting. Vic Fangio was asked a question about Pernell McPhee this week, who can still play. He has until 3 tomorrow to be activated. How do you see them utilizing Pernell McPhee in this game, or if he plays? He's like, I don't know. I mean, when I hear that, Pernell McPhee can rush the quarterback. I mean, I think that's the obvious answer there. Like, what do you mean you don't know how you're going to utilize Pernell McPhee? He's obviously a good pass rusher, and if there's someone who could get to Rodgers if he plays, this is the one guy that can do it. He's shown in the past that he can be a capable pass rusher, but for the strategy to stop Aaron Rodgers, just drop people back. Hopefully, he's been off this season, off his mark, so maybe he makes that errant throw and, kind of bails out the Bears defense for not having a pass rush.
Interesting.
Frankly, I don't want to hear I don't know from the defensive coordinator when asked how you're going to use the guy that they wanted to build the defense around, but that's just me.
Exactly. That's like astonishing. Like, how do you not know how you're going to use a key player on your defense? That's a little alarming, but it's whatever.
I mean, I get not wanting to show your hand, but obviously, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's such an obvious answer. He just doesn't want to give it because he just wants to, obviously Pernell is going to get after the quarterback, but that's still very strange.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about the Packers' run game, which I think is going to be pretty much non-existent. Obviously, they're down their top 2 running backs with Eddie Lacy and Starks. And Niles Davis, he doesn't even understand, he just came in this week off a trade. I don't think he's going to know enough of the offense to come in and, dominate any amount of carries. So, Brandon, like you said, we could see Randall Cobb back there in the backfield. We also could see a decent amount of Ty Montgomery because he played some running back in college, and, both of them saw some backfield snaps last week. So, Brandon, what do you see? What do you expect out of this Packers running game? Like I said, I'm not expecting them to do much. I think they're going to be very limited in that rushing attack, which is going to make their offense very one-dimensional.
Right. I think that we're going to see a lot of what we used to with the Packers when they didn't have Eddie Lacy, when they just kind of do these short little 2-3 yard dump-off passes to constitute a run game, to bring people in closer still. I think we're going to see more of that than we will actual running from either Ty Montgomery or Niles Davis, because like you said, Niles Davis just got there this week, so he's not going to know all the plays yet. So I think we'll see more of the 2-3 yard dump off passes like we used to see from the Packers.
Yeah, I agree as well there. Nick, so like you said, you kind of hinted at this earlier, and you talked about how the Bears should do what the Cowboys did. Can you give Bears fans more insight? Like what should the Bears do on defense to like completely shut down this Packers offense?
Well, I don't think they're going to completely shut it down, but I
Dang it, all
mean,
right.
what they can do to like help out. I mean, it's a lot of pressure is gonna rely on that secondary because they're gonna have to stay with their guys for a long, a long amount of time because there's not going to be that pass rush from the Bears defense. But I mean, what they can do, I guess, disguise coverages. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers has seen everything. It's going to be a tough one. Like, there's not an easy answer for that. I wish there was, but when you talk about it and you see all the injuries that the Bears have on defense, it's tough for Vic Fangio to create a scheme that's going to work with the guys that he has out there. So I can't give you like a definite answer, Will, but I mean, just drop back as many people as you can. Hopefully, like I said, that Rodgers makes the wrong throw because there's not a definite answer on how to stop him in this offense.
I'll give
Playing some prevent defense there, huh?
Yeah, prevent defense like Trestman used to do on goal line situations. Do you guys remember that?
Yeah,
Yep.
I don't even want to.
No.
I'm trying to flush that out of my memory, but thanks. I'm going to remember. I'm going to have nightmares about that again. But if I were Vic Fangio, a couple things I would do. We kind of hinted at earlier. Obviously, just limit the blitzes because you can try to get enough pressure with the 4 guys up front or 3, and maybe play some zone or man with a safety over the top. Because the Packers, they tend to throw a lot of the middle of the field, passes either be a post or a slant, and the corners. Since they do that a lot, why not take some chances and just jump some routes because they're going to have the safeties behind them just in case they miss some tackles or if they, obviously overrun a route. And on top of that, I think that those secondary, the corners and the safeties, they need to be prepared to hold that coverage for a long periods of time because as we talked about earlier, Aaron Rodgers, is really good at eluding pressure, escaping the pocket, bouncing around in the pocket, holding onto the ball, which seems like forever before he finds an open receiver. So the secondary needs to be prepared for that. And a good reason for this as well is because, like I said, I wouldn't even worry for like a millisecond about that Packers rush game because they're going to be very one-dimensional. And the only way I'm even going to be worried about the Packers running the ball is going to be Aaron Rodgers actually scrambling out of the backfield because he's actually I believe he's the only one with rushing touchdowns on the entire year for the Packers, if I'm not mistaken. I think he has like 2 rushing touchdowns on the year, which is the only one for the Packers all season, which is crazy to talk about. Probably not as crazy as Alshon still not having a touchdown, but kind of close. And I want to talk about third down real quick before we kind of wrap up this talk on the Packers offense. So last week, we went up against one of the worst teams on third down. Well, the Bears, we're going to have another tough task this week now because the Packers come into the game as the very best team on third down as they make third down conversions 49.3% of the time. And the Bears defense is 11th best on third down, only allowing opponents to 36.3%. So this all-important third down will be a chess match that we all kind of want to watch in this one as the Bears can't afford the Packers to extend those drives and stay on the field. Brandon, I want to talk about the red zone. Do you have any observations on how the Packers have fared down there in the red zone this season?
Not very well if they can't put up points. If Randall Cobb's saying we need more touchdowns and not field goals, it tells me they're struggling to get down there to score points. So I would say, the bend but don't break, but you really cannot break against a team that's struggling to score points anyway. So for the Bears defense, that's something to definitely keep in mind once you get down there is you cannot just give up at that point because if they're going to continue to struggle, then let them struggle.
Exactly. Let them kind of shoot themselves in the foot when they get down there. All right, so let's switch over and now let's talk about this Packers defense. They come in ranked as the 10th best in terms of yards allowed, only allowing 339 yards per game, and they give up the 16th most, or at least if you're half full, half empty kind of guy, 22.6 points per game. Brandon, I want to start with this Packers front seven. What insight do you have on that unit and who gets no less than 2 sacks per game?
This was a very hard, like watching the Dallas film against the Packers. This was very hard to get a good grasp on the Packers defense because they're typically a really solid run defense. They're second in the league in giving up an average of 72.4 rushing yards per game, and they have 16 sacks on the season, which is tied for 6th in the league. But we didn't see any of that against Dallas because their offensive line is so freaking good. So what we're looking at on the defensive line in this defense, you're looking at the rookie Kenny Clark, who has 8 tackles, the all not so important to us anymore. Julius Peppers, he has 6 tackles for the year, 2.5 sacks, and a forced fumble. Against Dallas, they're trying to keep him fresh. Obviously, didn't get very much playing time because I wanted him to play the whole season, getting in his older age. And he did have the only sack of the game, so that's something to watch out for. I imagine he's going to be licking his chops going against his former team. Then you have Latroy Guion, who has 6 tackles, 3 of them for a loss, and he was a non-factor against Dallas. He looked more like he was getting bullied than anything else. Then you have Mike Pennell and Mike Daniels. That's a lot of guys for the defensive line. They just swap them in and out all the time, so you got to really know what the personnel is out there if you're Brian Hoyer.
Yeah, you do. And, looking at this front seven, Hoyer actually, talked about him a little bit earlier this week. And he said, the one constant is obviously that the front seven is really good. We have to handle those guys and react to how they're going to play us on the best end. So obviously that means that he's talking about how they need to realize their strong side and obviously try to find ways to combat that. Nick, do you have any insight on how the Bears possibly can do that?
It's going to be tough, especially without, I know we're going to get to it, but without, Josh Sitton playing, it sucks that he's not going to play against his old team. That would have been interesting to see him go against, obviously, his former teammates. But without, this defensive line does have a lot of people on it. Like you were saying, Brandon, a lot of personnel that they bring in and out. And this is a Bears offense that is still struggling, and they couldn't get the run game going last week against a Jacksonville defense. And, Hoyer and with what he's been doing, which is gaining a lot of yards, but not plays. But against this defensive line, it might be a long day, especially without that veteran at left guard. And we still don't know who's going to fill in for that spot. It's either going to be Ted Larson or Eric Kush. So I don't know if that's going to affect the chemistry. What's, on a short week too, because obviously guys are still banged up, and I don't know. It could be a long day for this Bears offensive line, especially if they're one-dimensional because they can't run the ball, because this Packers defense was really good at stopping the run until last week, until they ran up against, probably the best offensive line in football in the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah, they did. Like you said, last week, Ezekiel Elliott, he had 157 yards on the ground, which makes you hope, hey, maybe Jordan Howard can kind of have a similar, outing tomorrow. But coming into the game before last week, the Packers never allowed an opposing running back to more than 39 yards on the ground. So obviously, and that was behind the Dallas offensive line that we've talked about a couple of times this season, just how good they really are. So I don't think that we should expect those kind of numbers for Howard. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of where he falls in that. But like you said, with Josh Sitton being gone, that's obviously going to have to affect some chemistry. This offensive line has been together all season. They played in every game together. So to throw in someone new on a short week with little time to prepare, I think we're going to see some, unfortunately going to see some of those miscues on that offensive line. Hopefully not, and hopefully I'm wrong. But I do think that we're possibly going to see those. And speaking of this Bears offensive line, one matchup that I'm kind of worried about here is going to be Nick Perry versus, good old Bobby Massey. Got to love that guy. He didn't give up a sack last week, so I can't give him crap for 1 week. But this week, he's going up against Nick Perry, who has 4.5 sacks on the year. So I'm obviously kind of concerned with his pass rush coming off that right side.
Also, to add to the pass rush from linebackers, Clay Matthews didn't have a very big week last week because the Dallas offensive line just kind of pushed him around, made him look really weak. But we know that Clay Matthews is Clay Matthews. He's a very good linebacker. And with the empty spot at left guard, I imagine that's where either Nick Perry or Clay Matthews is going to attack it right away to try and have a bounce back game.
That's
just something else to keep in mind.
Clay Matthews has, kind of like Aaron Rodgers in a way, hasn't had the best of seasons, hasn't been the Clay Matthews that everyone.
Since they moved him outside, he has not played as well as he did the last couple of seasons playing inside. So maybe this, hopefully not, but this may be the game where he goes, hey, there's a weak spot right there. I'm going to go attack it all game long and see what happens.
Yeah, it would make sense for them to do that against the Bears. Rodgers and Matthews to just kind of bring back and have a better parts of their season against this Bears, team that has obviously struggled. It makes sense, you guys. Looking at it, I don't know. I'm just seeing it that way.
It does make sense. Hopefully they're not listening. I'm sure they're not. But let's talk about this. Let's switch and let's talk about this Packers secondary, who is decimated just kind of like the Bears as well. Who are going to be without their top 3 corners, as Demarius Randall nor Quentin Rollins are going to be able to play tomorrow. Brandon, what kind of insight do you have there on that secondary?
They'll also be without Sam Shields and backup safety Chris Banjo. So now you're looking at Dimitri Goodson, who had a pass interference on Cole Beasley on a very short route, so it's not like it was that big of a deal. But then he also got beat by Butler on a deep route, and he got lucky because he dropped it later in the game. So this guy, Dimitri Goodson, he's only played about 30-ish snaps this year. So that has got to be a spot where the Bears attack, because if he hasn't played that much, like that tells me there's going to be so many opportunities, regardless if you're throwing to Meredith or Alshon, whoever's covering him. And you're also looking at Ladarius Gunter, who has 15 total tackles on the year, one of them for loss, and he has a forced fumble. He struggled against Terrence Williams. He got burned really bad on a double move for 42 yards. He ended up falling on the play. Looked like he broke his ankles. And he gave up touchdown to Butler in the back of the end zone. I'm sure you guys have all seen the highlights so far. Dak throwing it beautifully to Butler in the back of the end zone, plays perfectly. Gunter had absolutely no chance to get there. And so that is who we have to face right now, is Ladarius Gunter and Dimitri Goodson as the top two guys. Then you have Micah Hyde, who will likely play the slot. He was primarily on Cole Beasley. He did give up the 1-yard touchdown to Beasley early in the game. He's got 22 tackles on the year and a sack. So you got to watch out for the corner blitz a little bit. Then you have Clinton Dix as your free safety and Morgan Burnett as the strong safety. And Clinton Dix necessarily didn't have the best run support, but I think he knew against Dallas he would be needed more in that. So he had decent run support, but he also got burned on a couple plays. Then you have Morgan Burnett had the first interception of Dak Prescott's career, but it was thrown literally right at his ankle, so he pretty much had to catch it. And he made another very good athletic play to tip pass intended for Ezekiel Elliott. So you have two very good safeties backing up some weaker cornerbacks for this Packers secondary.
Yeah, for sure. And Nick, how do you think the Bears, what should they do in terms of targeting this decimated cornerback position? Obviously, they can, pile up the yards. We've seen it for the 4 weeks in a row now. They know how to move the ball through the air. They might even be without Eddie Royal, who's kind of still dealing with that toe injury, and he's on a short week. I've heard he's 50-50. Hopefully it's the 50 that he's going to give it a go. But what should the Bears do in terms of targeting this decimated cornerback position and hopefully find the end zone more than they've had in the past couple of weeks?
I think that a big thing with when you have younger corners is test them out early, on play action, see if they bite. And maybe those, our receivers, Cameron Meredith and Alshon Jeffrey, could have potentially should have a big day against these younger corners who have not had as much experience. And if the Bears can establish any type of run game, play action is going to be huge because, if they can bite in the backfield, those corners, those secondary players, it's going to give multiple opportunities for these Bears receivers or this Bears offense to make some big plays. But especially when you have guys that are filling in for other guys, you just want to test their intelligence, make sure that they know where exactly they are playing in the defense, that they are good in their zones and stuff. But I would do a lot of play action. We haven't seen very much of it. And if that could happen, I think the Bears could be, do pretty decently on offense and hopefully sustain drives.
Yeah, and I think that we need to keep another eye on Cameron Meredith because in the past couple games, he has 20 catches on 25 targets. He's topped 100 yards in both contests. He had 15 targets last week, which is most on the team. So, yeah, I expect the Bears to look his way often again than this one for sure. And hopefully, like you said, off the play action. Because what I think the Bears need to do here, obviously, first and foremost, you just have to establish the run and do it consistently. It's going to keep Rodgers off the field. And on top of that, you need to vary the runs between Kerry's slashing quick style with Jordan's slower developing runs. I think we saw that last week and how Kerry could be used as a good change of pace back with Howard in the game. Obviously, no offense, Brandon, as you are the president of the Kadeem Carey fan club. When Jeremy Langford gets back, that's going to be his role. But I think using the two different styles of running backs would be a good way to keep this defense on its toes, doing some different things, running out of the backfield, keeping them guessing on what's going to be happening. And on top of that, Nick, like you said, use the play action. And on top of that, move the pocket, use some bootlegs, combat that Green Bay blitz, make sure they're not just, Hoyer's not just a sitting duck back there for the pass rush of the Green Bay Packers. All right. So the Bears, like we've talked about, guys, they have been racking up those yards. They have the 7th most in the league, but it's not translating to points on the scoreboard as they are second to last in the NFL in points per game. And the Packers defense has allowed at least 286 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air out of the last 3 out of 5 games. So Brandon, this one's for you. How are the Cowboys able to put up 30 points last week? Because whatever they did worked, and the Bears obviously should follow suit.
Their offensive line has got to be the best unit in all of football. And I'm not just saying that because I watched Colin Cowherd today. I'm sorry, Colin, but I do really agree with that point that he had. That is the whole reason that Dak Prescott is having such good success, as well as Ezekiel Elliott. So, I mean, like I've always made the argument, you win games in the trenches. And that is exactly what Dallas did. They beat Green Bay in the trenches as well as the second level because they were up there to get to the linebackers and they made Clay Matthews a non-factor for the whole game. So you have to win in the trenches, and that's where I think it all starts with the Bears as far as getting those yards to translate into points as well.
Very good. Nick, how about you? Do you have any final thoughts on the Bears offense that you want to share before we move on?
Well, I just think that Dow Loggins needs to take some shots down the field, the offensive coordinator, because with this not having any of the starters for the Green Bay secondary, you just need to test them out. And with Alshon Jeffrey and Cameron Meredith, who are both, taller receivers, take shots down the field. And another thing is when the Bears are at like maybe 3rd and 8, don't throw the ball 5 yards and make, a receiver go get the yards. We've seen that so many times this season where the ball has just been short by a couple yards and they have to get off the field because they're a yard short. I want to see, it's very frustrating. And, I just want to see him take shots and just, have a sense of urgency when it's the third quarter, early in the third quarter, and they're just kind of, it looks like they're lollygagging, not even, I don't know, just watching this Bears offense, it seems like they just kind of disappear, especially later in the game. I want to see him, like I said, just take shots down the field, utilize your weapons, utilize Alshon Jeffrey. He still has not had a touchdown. He needs to get one this season. Needs to get one soon. There's no way he goes a season without a touchdown. God, if that happens.
It's possible. It's possible.
It could be possible, but you need to use him. And like I said, just don't throw the ball 3 yards short of the first down and get off the field a yard short, because that is so frustrating as a Bears fan. You guys know it. It's so frustrating to watch.
It is. And speaking of frustrating, it's frustrating to watch Brian Hoyer never take any chances. So my last thought on Bears offense is Brian Hoyer, take some damn chances. Even if you throw an interception, oh no, it's one interception, but at least you're trying to do something, down the field or trying to get a touchdown, because settling for field goals is not going to win you this game tomorrow night. So that's something that obviously we all want to see as Bears fans, is just take some more shots.
Yeah, and guys, we're Bears fans. We are so used to seeing interceptions. We haven't seen one. It's like weird. Like you said, like he needs to take shots. At least, they're trying to go for that deep ball and trying to move the ball downfield and get points. We like I said, we're Bears fans. We're used to seeing interceptions. It's just weird not seeing them playing, soft and like playing conventional is not going to win the game.
To add to the point of taking more shots down the field, if you watch the game from Sunday, you'll see where the Alshon and Ramsey got in the 2 pass interference. If you look in the stands, we're second row, which is pretty cool that we made it on TV. I had to point that out while I'm on here. Sorry. But even though that was one of those plays that ended up not getting like the plays canceled because they both interfered with each other, like that's better than throwing an interception. You have to at least continue to try and take those chances if they're going to present themselves.
Yeah, but that was like first quarter, and then like Nick said,
but then why not do it in the fourth quarter then too, if it's still going to work? I'm not saying just quit after the first half.
Exactly, that's what we're saying. Like if you're going to take those shots early, you might as well be taking them later on in the game as well. Keep the defense honest, because obviously if you're not going to take those shots, you're just going to be keeping everything in front of them.
Cornerbacks in Green Bay who both got beat pretty bad a couple times last week against Dallas. So I would love to see the Bears' height advantage at receiver take advantage of this.
Exactly. It's long overdue, guys. It really is.
We are all preaching to the choir, you guys. All preaching to the choir right now.
Pretty much. All right. So I want to do another, every week it seems like I'm talking about the same thing here when it comes to penalties, because over the past couple weeks, I've been very vocal about my concerns regarding the downward trend with the Chicago Bears and their penalties, because lately they've been undisciplined and the penalties have killed more drives than I can count on my fingers. And, last week the Bears had 10 penalties against them. That's way too many, guys. And really, I just hope the Bears can just be more focused. And, with that new addition to the offensive line, whoever's going to be playing at left guard, that's going to be something to watch going up in Lambeau, because the Bears really can't afford many false starts and, starting drives going backwards. Or, if say it's like 3rd and 2 and they have a false start, makes it 3rd and 7. That makes it 10 times harder to even convert that 3rd down. So penalties is another thing we need to keep an eye on tomorrow night. And also, let's do another quick hit on special teams while we're here, because, last week Barth did do better. He made 3 of his 3 kicks. I can't believe I'm even saying that. But the Bears, like we said, they just need to stop settling for field goals and just find a way to get in the end zone. And also last week, 66% of Patrick O'Donnell's punts were inside the 20, which is good news for the field position battle, something else to keep an eye for. And for the Packers on their special teams, Mason Crosby is perfect on the year, and their punter has struggled with only a 38.6 net punt average. All right, guys, you know what time it is? It's time to go around the horn and give our game predictions. So, Nick, I was going to say, since you're leading the series right now at 2-4, you can go first. But now, since you're the shortest, you can go first.
So I'm still going first. All right. I'm picking Green Bay to win 20-17. It's gonna be a close game, you guys. Regardless of all the injuries and Rodgers not being Rodgers and the Bears being in Lambeau Field, 2017, Green Bay will end up being the Bears.
All right, Brandon.
I hate picking Green Bay, but I'm going to 16-13. I think it is tough to go up there and win, especially with a struggling offense that's just settling for field goals. However, their offense is struggling as well. And with two secondaries that are decimated, it's very hard to put a final score to it. So I'm going to say the struggling offenses conquer the decimated secondaries. So Green Bay is going to win 16-13. But this is the first time that I have picked against the Bears this season. So
that is. So I
just want to throw that out there.
Speaking of the one time I picked against the Bears, they won. So hopefully you have that kind of luck, because I can never pick Green Bay over Chicago ever. So I have the Bears winning 21-28. You guys have little faith, but it's okay. I understand. All right. So let's get into our last section of this show, and which is going to be our bold predictions. And I'll go ahead and start with mine. This week, my bold prediction: Green Bay is going to have less than 25 yards on the ground. That's pretty bold. I'll take it. Nick, how about you?
I just was scrambling to make this up, but Aaron Rodgers is going to throw 2 interceptions. I don't remember the last time we ever seen Aaron Rodgers throw 2 interceptions against the Bears, but he's going to do it this week.
It was probably last, Thanksgiving, but it's okay.
Brandon,
Brandon,
only one.
Dang it, you checked. All right, Brandon, go ahead. What's your bold prediction, man?
Brian Hoyer is going to outplay Aaron Rodgers just because of the stat I threw out at the beginning of the game. So let's just say that Brian Hoyer is going to throw for more yards than Aaron Rodgers is the way to outplay him.
Okay, so this is going to be just stat-based, not.
I can make it opinion-based, but let's put some facts behind it.
Okay, so now stats are facts. You confuse me, man.
No, analytics is not the way to go. Stats are okay.
We agree to disagree. All right, so before we head out, Nick, let's end the show with your few reasons why the Bears will win on Sunday. But I guess that was already in my notes because I assumed the Bears you're going to pick the Bears to win, and that's usually how we end this show. But you picked the Bears to lose, so you can give us a few reasons why you think the Bears are coming up just short.
Yeah, I mean, the slight chance that they do win, it's going to be if they run the ball effectively and keep Aaron Rodgers off the field, and like we said earlier, that play action with those young DBs, then you got to exploit the injuries that they do have for Green Bay. And with Alshon Jeffrey and Cameron Meredith, I think the Bears can do that. And the last thing is that the Bears secondary needs to stay disciplined, because we know Aaron Rodgers is going to have a lot of time to throw. So they're going to have to stay connected to their whatever receiver they're on. But I mean, those are 3 things the Bears have to do if they want to have a chance of winning in Green Bay. Not saying they're going to do it, and that's why I picked them to lose. But if they do those 3 things, they'll have a chance.
All right. Well, I'm sure everyone's thinking what I'm thinking here. Since you picked the Bears to lose, just tell me why. What's going to be their shortcoming tomorrow night?
Jay Cutler's not playing. That's what it is. Honestly, if Jay Cutler was playing, I think they win. No, I'm dead. That's what it is, because he gives us more options on offense. And Brian Hoyer, we've seen it for 4 weeks now. It's just the same old thing over and over again. We're waiting for an interception to happen. You're going to get that with Cutler, but at least he's going to take shots down the field. Honestly, if he was playing this game, I would feel so much more confident. I just know that we're not going to win because of Brian Hoyer's under center. Not that he's the only problem, but I just don't see him winning because of him. With Cutler, I could see that. Even despite, the terrible plays had in Green Bay, he did it last year on a huge stage on Thanksgiving. That's the big thing. If Jay Cutler was playing, I would have picked them to win, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brandon, you need to read, if you haven't yet, a really good column by Tim Buffo about chili and like Hoyer and Cutler. I tweeted it earlier today, and he pretty much talks about how there are two different pots of chili. And Cutler's the ones with beans, and Hoyer's the one with not. And Hoyer's the one that's bland, it gets the job done, but it's just not the same where when you have the chili with the beans, you're going to have a couple of those farts, but at least you're going to, get the good chili. And it just has, it's more full, it's more hearty, it's more of a complete package. So you have to just take the farts with it. So I guess just read it, you'll understand. It's really
I mean, it all makes sense when you say it like that.
Yeah, of course.
My issue is it's not so much Jay Cutler himself. There are other issues on the offense, like we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
A young running game that has yet to develop. It doesn't matter who you have under center. If you don't have a running game, you can't pass the ball. But Brian Hoyer is at least throwing for 300 yards these last couple games with a very young running game that's still developing, even though Jordan Howard has proved that he can rush for 100 yards. Having the ability to pass for that much, I think, makes a difference.
I want to find someone, if you're listening, find this stat. How many of Brian Hoyer's passing yards have came from yards after the catch? Because that's something I want to know, because I think it would be a lot, which isn't terribly all on him, but it's still,
But would that not be equal to Jay Cutler throwing the ball downfield, though? Like, I'm just curious about that, too. Like, if he's going to take more chances downfield, his yards per attempt and Brian Hoyer's receivers yak are essentially going to even out, are they not?
But there's a reason why we're not reaching the end zone, and it has to be because we're not taking shots in there, and we're trying to get our yak in there and try and just run it in there, and we're just not taking those shots. But
we need Jay Cutler.
There we go. That's a good way to end the show. Two out of three majority wins. We need Jay Cutler. All right, so that's all we have for you tonight, guys. I want to thank you all for watching live or listening to the podcast. So for Brandon and Nick, I'm Will DeWitt. We're going to talk to you we're going to talk to you tomorrow. I was going to say on Sunday, but no, this is a Thursday night game. This is a short week. So we're going to be back tomorrow, back-to-back days of the Bears Brothers podcast. It's going to be fun. So we will talk to you all after the game tomorrow on Thursday. Hopefully we can celebrate another Chicago Bears win against the Packers. Until then, you know what to do. Bear down, Chicago.